I decided I wasn't going to kiss her hello any longer. Diana said those words herself, on tape, in her own voice, into the recorder she used to speak the truth into when nobody from the institution was listening. She wasn't describing a spontaneous moment of anger. She wasn't recounting something that had happened before she could stop herself. She was describing a decision, deliberate, premeditated, made in advance in the quiet of her own apartment, before she ever got in the car. She had made up her mind. From that point forward, she would not offer Camilla Parker Bowles the greeting that royal social life expected. Not the kiss on the cheek, not the warmth, not the performance of normalcy that the arrangement depended on everyone maintaining in order to function. She would shake her hand, nothing more, and she would do it knowing exactly what the refusal communicated. To Camilla, to Charles, to every person in the room watching the Princess of Wales refuse the gesture that said everything was fine, everything was not fine, and Diana had decided to stop pretending otherwise. What happened after she made that decision, the party she walked into, the room that froze, the basement, the 4 words, the car ride home, sent a shock through the institution that it had not been prepared for. Not because a princess had confronted a mistress, because a woman who had been managed and contained and handled and advised to keep her dignity by staying silent had decided quietly and permanently that she was done with the silence. The establishment had no protocol for that. It had no press secretary response for it, no courtier language for it, no mechanism for absorbing a woman who had stopped cooperating with the pretense. It had managed Diana as a performance for 8 years. It had not prepared for Diana as a decision. This is that story. Everything in this script comes from Diana's own voice on the Morton tapes, recorded in secret in 1991 and 1992, released publicly after her death. From Ken Wharf's memoir and interviews. From Paul Burrell's sworn testimony at the 2008 inquest. From Tom Bower's Rebel King, Tina Brown's The Diana Chronicles, and Ingrid Seward's accounts built on years of direct access to the people inside this world. Nothing here is guesswork. Where the record goes quiet, I'll tell you it goes quiet. Before we go further, if this channel has ever given you a Diana that felt true, take 1 second and subscribe. This one matters. Let's go back. Not to the party, to the lunch that nobody remembers, 8 years before the party, where the whole thing actually started, early 1981, before the wedding, before the engagement had even been announced publicly. Diana Spencer was a 20-year-old woman who had been seeing Charles for a matter of months, and one afternoon she found herself sitting across a lunch table from Camilla Parker Bowles, just the two of them, arranged in the way things were arranged in that world, without any of the participants quite acknowledging why. Camilla had suggested it. She had called Diana and said, in the warm, casual voice of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, "Do let's have lunch soon." Diana described the lunch on the Morton tapes as being very tricky indeed. She said Camilla had asked her something that seemed innocuous and was not. Camilla had said, "You're not going to hunt when you go and live at Highgrove, are you?" Highgrove, Charles's country estate in Gloucestershire, 15 miles from Camilla's home. Diana said she had thought, as she sat there trying to navigate the question, as far as she was concerned, that was her communication route. Camilla was not asking about horses. Camilla was conducting a reconnaissance. She was working out her territory, what she would retain, what she would yield, where the lines would be drawn. Tina Brown, in the Diana Chronicles, put it with precision. Diana deduced, rightly, that Camilla was working out what was going to be her territory. Diana was 20 years old. She had been dating Charles for months. She was sitting across from the woman who had owned the territory before her, and was now, politely, over lunch, making calculations about how much of it she planned to keep. Diana said nothing useful in response. She navigated the lunch and went home, and she filed it. The way she always filed things in the vivid memory, the part of her that paid attention and kept records, and did not let things dissolve into the managed version that the institution preferred. She filed it alongside the bracelet, alongside the phone call she would overhear from the bathroom, alongside the honeymoon cufflinks with the 2 Cs, alongside every event and dinner and weekend at Highgrove, where the arrangement sat in the middle of the room and everyone pretended they couldn't see it. She filed all of it, and she waited. The years between the lunch and the decision were not empty. They were full of the kind of things that accumulate in a person who is managing too much in private while performing too much in public. By 1986, 5 years into the marriage, Charles had returned fully to Camilla. This is documented. Charles admitted it himself on national television in 1994, adultery, after the marriage had irretrievably broken down, was how he framed it. His biographer Jonathan Dimbleby put the date at 1986. William was 4 years old. Harry was 2. Diana knew before the biographers confirmed it. She said on the Morton tapes, "I knew something was happening before that. But the 5th year I had confirmation. The confirmation came the way so many things came to her, through a phone call she wasn't supposed to hear, words she wasn't supposed to catch, the specific intimacy of a man talking to the person he actually loved while his wife was in the next room. He said, to whoever was on the other end of the line, 'Whatever happens, I will always love you.' She knew who was on the other end. She confronted him. The row that followed, she described as filthy. His response, and this is the line that tells you everything about the world she was living inside, was that he refused to be the only Prince of Wales who never had a mistress. As though it were a tradition. As though she were being unreasonable for objecting to it, she went to Philip. She went to the Queen. She received from both a version of the same answer, nothing useful. Philip's answer had been given to Charles years earlier in advance. The Queen told her she didn't know what Diana should do and that Charles was hopeless. 2 sentences and a closed door. The institution had assessed the situation and found no reason to change it. So Diana went to work. Not publicly, not yet. Privately, in the way she did everything that mattered. She began paying attention to what the pretense cost and what it protected and who it served. She began to understand that the arrangement depended on her cooperation, that the whole social machinery of dinners and weekends and country houses and Charles's circle depended on Diana playing the role that had been assigned to her, the dignified wife, the woman who stayed home from the parties she wasn't wanted at, the woman who kissed Camilla on the cheek when they encountered each other and performed normalcy for the room. She had been performing it for 8 years by February 1989, and then she made the decision. It came before the party, before the car, before the frozen room, before the basement and the 4 words. It came in the quiet of her own thinking, in the space between receiving the invitation and deciding whether to accept it. She was going. She had decided that. A voice inside her, she said on the tapes, told her to go for the hell of it. Nobody expected her. That was part of it. The knowledge that the room had already calculated her absence and arranged itself around the assumption that she would stay home the way she always stayed home. But the other decision, the one that nobody has focused on quite enough, was this. She was not going to kiss Camilla hello. She had decided, done. From that point forward, the social greeting was withdrawn. She would extend her hand. She would shake. She would offer the minimum that courtesy required, and not one gesture more. Think about what that meant in the world she was operating in. Royal social life runs on ceremony, on the performance of warmth, on the kiss on the cheek that says, regardless of what is true, that we are all managing this together and the arrangement is acceptable and nobody is going to say otherwise. The greeting is not personal, it is institutional. It is the lubricant that keeps the machinery running. Diana withdrew it, not in anger, not in a scene. She withdrew it the way she did her most powerful things, quietly, in advance, having thought it through. A decision made in private, implemented in public, with a steadiness that the room would feel before it could name what it was feeling. She got in the car. She went to the party. The room froze when she walked in. Ken Wharf was there. He has described it across decades of interviews in the same words every time. It was almost like freeze-framing a scene in a movie, not because Diana had done anything dramatic at the door, just because she was there. Because every person in that room looked up and recalculated simultaneously, running the same calculation, arriving at the same answer, feeling the same thing that a room feels when something it did not prepare for has arrived. Diana moved through the party. She had no close friends there. She had known this before she arrived. She navigated the room for about an hour with the specific patience of someone who has a plan and is not in a hurry to execute it. She found things to look at. She found things to hold. She performed the surface of a woman who was simply attending a party. And then she noticed that Charles and Camilla had disappeared. She went to Wharf. The sentence she said to him, the one he has repeated in every interview since, the one he cannot stop returning to, was this: "You've got to come with me. I can't find my husband or Camilla." He said he couldn't say no. Clearly, this woman was in some distress. They went downstairs together, to the basement, and there on a sofa were Charles and Camilla, just talking. 2 people in a conversation, in a house that was, in every way that mattered, her world. Diana walked toward them. Wharf watched her go. And the word he has used in every interview, every account, every time he has been asked to describe what he saw, is the same word, always: confident. She walked across that basement floor, confident. Terrified, she said on the tapes. She had said for years that she was terrified of Camilla, and she walked toward her anyway with her hands steady and her face composed, and whatever it had cost her to make the decision already fully paid. She asked the men to leave. Charles, by her account, went like a chicken with no head, upstairs, away, gone. The other men followed, and it was just the two of them, the wife and the woman who had occupied her husband's heart since before the wedding. And Diana did not kiss her hello. She extended her hand, a handshake, formal. The greeting she had decided on in advance, before she ever left Kensington Palace, in the quiet of her own apartment where the decisions that mattered got made. Then she spoke. Her words are on the public record, documented in her own voice on the Morton tapes. She told Camilla she knew what was going on. She told her not to treat her like an idiot. She said she was sorry she was in the way. She said it must be hell for both of them. And then 4 words that the basement could not contain. I want my husband. Camilla's response, the one she gave, the one that Ken Worf has spent 30 years unable to fully decode, was to gesture at everything Diana had. The men who loved her, the children, the life. What more could she want? The answer Diana gave her was the truest thing said in that house that night, or possibly in the whole decade of the marriage. I want my husband. Not the title. Not the palaces. Not the charity work or the crowds or the cover of every magazine in the world. Him. The man she had married. The man she had stood beside at the altar of St. Paul's Cathedral and said vows to while 750 million people watched, and Camilla sat in the 3rd row in a pale grey pillbox hat. She wanted her husband. She did not get him. She never got him. That was the answer the institution had given her 8 years earlier, and the answer that night did not change. But something else happened, something Worf saw in the car on the way home that he has been trying to describe properly ever since. She had offloaded it. That's the word he used, offloaded. The things she had been carrying through the lunch and the bracelet and the cufflinks and the phone call, and Philip's 5-year rule and the Queen's 2 sentences, she had put it down in that basement. Not all of it. Not forever. But enough. He said she seemed much more relaxed afterward. He said he saw a positive, stronger Diana moving in a direction from that night forward. He was right. Here is what the institution had not calculated for. The world it had built around the arrangement depended on a very specific version of Diana. Manageable Diana. The Diana who stayed home from parties she wasn't wanted at, and accepted the situation with the dignity the palace told her was her best weapon. The Diana who kissed Camilla hello, because that was what you did and social performance was the currency of survival in that world. That Diana had existed, in various forms, for 8 years. The Diana who walked into the party at Ham was something else. She had made a decision in private and executed it in public without asking anyone's permission. She had withdrawn the greeting. She had gone to the basement. She had sent the men upstairs like chickens with no heads, and said what she knew to the one person it was about. She had not screamed. She had not made a scene in any of the ways the institution had prepared to manage. She had simply refused, quietly and completely, to perform the normalcy that the arrangement required. The establishment had no language for that, no protocol, no management strategy. Within 2 years she was making secret recordings for a journalist. Within 3, a book had detonated under the House of Windsor. Within 4, the Prime Minister was announcing the separation in the House of Commons. Within 6, she was on the BBC in front of 23 million people saying 3 of us in this marriage, with a composure that had been building since a February night in 1989 when she decided she was not going to kiss Camilla hello anymore. One decision. Made in private. Implemented in public. No fanfare. No announcement. A handshake instead of a kiss in a basement in Richmond. And the institution, the most managed, most protocol-governed, most practiced family in the world at absorbing difficult things, had no idea what to do with it. There is one more thing that needs to be said about that night. About what the decision actually cost her, and what it built. Because the story of Diana refusing to kiss Camilla hello is almost always told as a story about confrontation. About the basement, the 4 words, the men who fled upstairs, Ken Worf standing 3 feet away, trying to decode a sentence he still can't explain. Those details are real, and they matter. But they are the surface of something deeper, that the record only shows if you look at the full shape of Diana's life after that February night. The decision she made in the apartment, I am not going to kiss her hello anymore, was not just about Camilla. It was about Diana. About what she was willing to keep performing and what she was not. about the line she had been moving toward for 8 years, step by step, loss by loss, closed door by closed door, until she finally arrived at the place where the performance cost more than the truth. She had been told in various forms, by various people who thought they were helping her, that dignity was staying quiet, that the graceful thing, the royal thing, the right thing, was to maintain the surface, to kiss the cheek, to sit at the dinners, to appear at the events, to give the institution the cooperation it needed to function, and trust that the institution would eventually find a way to protect her in return. The institution never protected her, not once, not from the bracelet before the wedding, not from the cufflinks on the honeymoon, not from the 5-year rule Philip gave Charles before the ink was dry, not from the years of Highgrove weekends and the phone calls and the closed circle of friends that formed around the arrangement like a wall she was not permitted to climb, not from the 2 sentences the Queen gave her when she came sobbing, not from any of it. The institution had taken her cooperation and given her nothing back. And so in an apartment at Kensington Palace on an ordinary evening, she renegotiated the terms, unilaterally, without announcement. She withdrew one small piece of the performance, a greeting, a kiss on the cheek, the social gesture that said everything is manageable, and we are all handling this with grace, and she replaced it with something honest, a handshake, cold and formal and true. The room noticed. The room always notices. That is what rooms do when someone stops performing in them. They feel the withdrawal before they can name it. They recalibrate. They freeze the way Worf described the party freezing the moment she walked through the door, not because of what she did, because of what she had decided to stop doing. She had stopped pretending. And everything that followed, every tape, every book, every interview, every moment she stood in front of the world and told the truth, was built on the foundation of that one private decision. A handshake instead of a kiss, the beginning of the rest of it. Leave her here. Not in the basement. Before it. The moment in the apartment at Kensington Palace, when the decision settled, she's been thinking about it. The invitation is on the table somewhere. The party is at Camilla's sister's house. Nobody expects her to go. That's why she's going. And she has decided something else. Something small that contains everything large. She is not going to kiss Camilla hello. She will shake her hand. That is all. The minimum courtesy requires, and not one gesture more. It's a small thing. The withdrawal of a social greeting, something that in another life, in a different situation, would barely register. A slightly cooler hello at a party, nobody would notice, nobody would care. But in this world, in this situation, in this marriage, it is everything. Because the arrangement has run for 8 years on the cooperation of everyone involved, including the woman it was most costing. Including the Princess of Wales, who had been told by her mother-in-law that she didn't know what Diana should do, who had been told by her father-in-law that there was a 5-year timeline for this, who had been told by her husband that mistresses were traditional. She had cooperated with the pretense. She had performed the normalcy. She had kissed the cheek when the world expected the cheek to be kissed. She is done with that now. She made the decision quietly, in her own apartment, without asking anyone, without telling anyone, without requesting the institution's permission or Charles's approval or the palace's management of what would happen next. She made it because she finally could, because something had shifted in the part of her that had been performing patience for 8 years, because a voice inside her said go for the hell of it, and she listened to the voice. She is going to the party. She is going to shake the hand. She is going to say what she knows in the basement to the one person who needs to hear it. And in the morning, after the car ride home, after the tears, after the thing she had been carrying was finally, partially, imperfectly put down, she is going to feel what Ken Worf described from the seat beside her. Stronger, not fixed, not resolved, not in possession of the marriage she had asked for. Stronger. The decision to stop performing something false is its own kind of freedom, even when everything around you stays the same, even when the answer doesn't change, even when you cry the whole way home. She stopped kissing Camilla hello. Everything that came after started there. Thank you for staying with me through this one. The small decisions are always the ones that contain the largest truths. A handshake instead of a kiss. A voice inside her saying go for the hell of it. A woman who had been performing normalcy for 8 years deciding, in her own apartment, without asking permission, that she was done. That is not the fairy tale version of Diana. That is something better. That is someone choosing themselves, quietly, in a way that the institution had no protocol for and no management strategy for and no prepared response to. She just decided. And then she went.